Good morning. Thank you everyone for joining us for the third installment of the 2023 Precision University. Today, we're going to be talking with a great lineup of panelists about Ohio Rural Broadband Initiative and the need for connectivity in agriculture. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. John Fulton to introduce our four panelists that we have joining us today.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. And we welcome everyone here to a really important topic as we think about, we've really been focused on autonomy here the last couple of weeks. But we also think about just having connectivity at the farm, not only to enable autonomy, but we think about rural education, we think about emergency response, all those needs. But today we're really going to hone in about agriculture production and at the farm level, some of the efforts across the U.S., but here really in Ohio that are important to really bring wireless connectivity to the farms. So with that, we've got four great panelists. I'm excited to hear some of their comments. They all come from a little bit different perspective. Kind of the layout for today's sessions for everyone. We're gonna go through some discussion here for 30 to 40 minutes. And then, as Elizabeth alluded to, if you got questions, throw those in the Q&A box, and we'll get to the questions at the end of here, and we'll spend some time working through your questions once we get through some of the discussions. So with that, I'm going to welcome our four panelists today. I'm going to start, at least the way it looks on my screen, with Matt. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, but Matt Aultman, it's great to have you here. So go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone. You're on mute, Matt.
Is that better?
Excellent.
My name is Matt Aultman. I'm a commissioner in Darke County. I'm on my 7th year as commissioner, chairman for the last 4. When I come into the office, one of the goals was to increase people wanting to move to our county. And one of the things to increase that is connectivity. Anymore, your kids go off to college, they don't have that connectivity when they come home, so they move back to where they went to college at or find somewhere it draws them. So it's become a economic development tool for our county, and that's what our interest is. This county, kind of give you a top level thing, has been working on it since September of 21 to go through the process to bring full connectivity from one end of our county to the other, in use of different funds to get there. And we're getting close to implement, and we're hoping by the end of the year to have between 90 and 94% coverage in our county between a wired and a wireless solution. So look forward to the conversations today, and we'll go from there. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Matt. Steven Strickland with Ericsson. Want to go ahead and hand it to you, Steven?
Yeah, appreciate that, John. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Outstanding. So great to see everyone this morning. Steven Strickland, I'm Director of Partnerships and Channels here at Ericsson. For those of you that may not be familiar with Ericsson, we're the hidden fabric of the mobile network operators. In the United States, we are responsible for over 50% of the mobile infrastructure with your tier 1 mobile operators, 40% of the global data traffic. Get into a little bit more about Ericsson as we go along, but in my role, I'm responsible for ecosystems that deliver advanced connectivity out across multiple industry segments. About 22, 23 years in the technology and software industries. A lot of that has been in telecommunications. I also sit on a working group within the Federal Communication Commission's Precision Agriculture Task Force, which is responsible for reviewing connectivity and technology needs for precision agriculture across the United States. This actually ties to the Connectivity Act of 2018. And we have a charter around mapping and analyzing agricultural lands, examining content of current and future connectivity demands, encouraging adoption of jobs, and accelerating broadband. As we talk about these objectives, you'll see really how we're developing recommendations from a practical but also a policy standpoint that's going to achieve adoption and close the digital divide up to 95% by the year 2025. So look forward to the discussion this morning.
Thanks, Steven. Dr. Scott Shearer with us from Ohio State. Scott.
Thank you very much, John. My name is Scott Shearer. I serve as chair of the Department of Food, Agricultural, and Biological Engineering. Here at Ohio State, we're between two colleges, College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences, as well as College of Engineering. I have a lot of interest in how technology is going to evolve in agriculture. I continue to see one of the constraints for production agriculture in this country as being access to broadband in rural areas. We're thinking a lot about, obviously, a broadband at the farmstead, but we're also thinking about that last mile and what connects the equipment in the field. We know there's going to be a variety of solutions, and there's a lot of players in the game, so to speak, but we also need some clarity on what's going to be needed in agriculture. And, you know, a lot of us are talking about autonomous field machinery. We're talking about some of the equipment in the animal industry, robotic milkers and things like that. But I also want to get people thinking about water management and how connectivity is going to be important to the future of water management in a state like Ohio. So that's where my interests lie, and pleased to be on the panel this morning.
Thanks, Scott. Johnny Spendlove, and Johnny, welcome you with John Deere. So turn it over to you.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity. Johnny Spendlove. I am the product manager for connectivity at John Deere. And so my responsibilities are getting every machine connected that Deere builds, right? From, lawnmowers all the way up to combines. And so obviously rural connectivity is a really important part, maybe a key part of enabling many of the technologies that we bring to bear as a company. So, operation centers, our digital ecosystem, that's kind of the foundation of our tech stack, where you can see in real time what all of your machines are doing across a farm, all the way up to autonomy that we're talking about here. Those all require a machine that's connected and a farm that's connected. So, my job is really focusing on the machine side of that, making sure all of our machines have connectivity wherever they are. And, we are interested in in getting those machines connected in any way, shape, or form. So cellular, all the way up to, you may have seen in the news, we recently released an RFP for satellite connectivity. So, whatever it takes, we're determined to get those machines in the field connected.
Yeah. Thanks, Johnny. Steve, I'm going to start with you a little bit, if you don't mind. Let's kind of set the stage. You guys have, on your in your FCC work, kind of went through and did kind of a analysis and have developed some reports. And in that, you guys looked at, agriculture as one of those sectors, and maybe share with everyone today some of the findings, and then we'll go down the road and let everyone kind of respond to that. But share with us some of what was in the report in particular. I remember I saw that you saw as needs for agriculture.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a great segue. And when we look at connectivity, when we think about connectivity, it's not just mobility. It's not unlicensed spectrum or fiber. It's a combination. We have to look at overall the economics required to achieve last mile connectivity, not just broadband to the farmhouse, but out across the acreage in the farm. And when you think about technology and why it exists, it's about implementing processes for farmers to make decisions in real time in the field. It's going to ultimately save human resource effort, increase production, lower their costs. Ohio is no exception. You've got, I believe, 88 counties. 32 of those would be considered Appalachian, more rural, where there's limited broadband access. So as we think about connectivity, it's not just about ensuring supply and access to the bandwidth, but it's also about enabling a very rich device and application-centric ecosystem that is going to enable core technology decisions by data gathering, analysis. You hear terms AI, ML. These are drilled down to the edge, to the field level, and ultimately cuts across the entire supply chain of the agri-food industry. Now, from the standpoint of the Precision Agriculture Task Force, so as I mentioned, it was formed in response to the 2018 Farm Bill. The FCC was chartered with standing up a task force, and those subsequent 4 working groups that I mentioned earlier in the introduction. That kicked off about 3 years ago. So we finished the first term. We published our first term report in November of 2021. You can actually find that on the FCC's website in Precision Agriculture. And then this past December, our second term, so I was appointed to a second term, we published our preliminary report for the second term. And, going into this year, we'll publish our final report. Now, these working groups, there's 4, they're looking across different areas of the precision agriculture space, from jobs to connectivity to demand out at the farm. And then mapping the current access. So some of the objectives that we take on is one, we're identifying gaps across the availability of broadband access down to the farm. We're promoting policy and regulatory solutions to encourage the adoption of broadband across precision agriculture. We're developing plans and recommendations to rapidly expand the deployment of broadband. As I mentioned, 2025, the goal is to achieve at least 95% broadband connectivity under the FCC standards. Now that's kind of a moving target, right? They have a standard today, but we also have to look at 2030 and beyond. What precision ag technologies are really going to drive the bandwidth use cases and ultimately your up, down, latency, et cetera. And then recommendations back to commission to ensure that the USDA secretary and the farming industry is set up for success via funding mechanisms. Once our recommendations are taken into account, it's viewed by Congress, and that's ultimately going to drive grants and other funding vehicles, and also intragovernmental collaboration to ensure that these programs are built in a way to maximize broadband deployment and access to unserved and underserved areas.
Let me ask Matt. So Steven said 2020, if I heard you right, Steven, we're talking 95% coverage is kind of the goal by 2025, right? Mm-hmm. And Matt, we'll start with you over in Darke County. Where are you guys kind of at? What's your kind of tangent on this? And I would kind of throw this out, if someone could just, maybe for our audience, you hear this all the time, that last mile. What do we mean by that last mile too? So if Matt, or we can throw that down to them, but we probably want to just make sure that we're very clear what we're talking about when we speak to the last mile as well. But Matt, tell us a little about what you guys got going on.
Well, I can cover that last mile piece when I cover what we're at, but where we're at currently, our county was mapped at 60% coverage. That means those folks have connectivity that meets the FCC quality standard of 100 up, 20 down, or 20. Sorry, I keep those flipping, but 100 down and 20 up, which means a lot of them are connected to fiber. But what we're trying to do is get those folks, it's 1 or 2 houses per mile connected in there. We have the last mile is from that middle mile solution. So you bring your internet into a county to a connection node. and then it gets distributed through a county through like a web, for layman's speaking, within the county. And then you have your WISPs, your wireless internet service providers. So it's like your last mile is those WISPs. Those folks are the ones that's going to be knocking on your door, hooking up stuff to your house. They're the ones that's going to be coming out when you say, hey, we don't have connectivity. Those are our last mile folks. When you get on those conversations. But where we're at as a county is we're trying to fill the gaps, not only for the ag sector, but for the emergency services that goes along with it. And we're building that middle mile network. So when you're in government, you don't want to pick winners and losers and things like that for when you're providing those services. So we'll provide the middle mile service to give that web of connectivity for those folks. And then we'll have the WISPs or the local internet providers come in and provide that last mile that works with each farm, each household to get us that connectivity. Our goal here in the county, we've been, like I said in the introduction, working since 2021 on this, is to get something for everybody. Everybody knows COVID, when kids was at home at school, things like that was happening. We had kids going to McDonald's sitting to do their homework. And it's been a goal of our board is to never do that again, to be able to provide services at home. And to get there is we're looking to use the Marks Tower system in our plan. Marks is a statewide emergency system that has towers set up across the state. And it gives us that vertical infrastructure that we need that gets us higher than like the grain legs, the silos, the bins, things like that. So we can get that connectivity even further, possibly get our system rolled out for maybe 1 or 2 more towers. And then what that does is provide opportunities for a John Deere or Case IH or one of those to provide some of their satellite tech on those same towers so they can connect that automation technology off those towers as well. But funding wise, to get there, it's been a challenge because you get to federal funding and those opportunities to set up, we have to be the 100 by 20, like I said earlier. And some of that isn't available when you're trying to gauge large distances to some of these homes. It's one house per mile in our area. And you're looking at $3,000 to $5,000 per home to hook up that home. And you look at houses, we got roughly 50,000 people in our county. We got 20,000 some houses. And let's say you have 40% of those underserved. So you got 800 houses times $4,000. That gets to be a sizable chunk of change for a county to roll out, especially in rural communities like found here in Western Ohio and down in Appalachia and the southeast part of Ohio. So there's some new technologies coming out. I don't want to deep delve into that tech, but we're looking at Tirana controllers as some of the new controllers that's out there that can do a better permeation of structures and leaves and trees, meaning that once we send this signal out, you're going to have that signal get to the customer and a similar, if not same quality as what you're sending it out, even though it has a building or a woods or whatever. So you don't drop that signal when you get it out there. And there's all kinds of new tech coming out, but that seems to be the newest and greatest. And we're going to try to implement that. So we're future proofing our network. So you might hear that from other folks in this conversation is how do you future proof it? Because we're not going to stop with 100 by 20. We want to hit 250 by 50. And eventually you're going to be in that half gigs network somewhere, an even gig network to meet the demands of industry, to meet the demands of data travel. And then when you build all this out, we're looking to lay an IoT network underneath it. And IoT is Internet of Things. So we can talk about that a little bit more later, but that gives you roughly where we're at. There's a lot of counties in Ohio that's working down a similar path as us, but timing's the big thing. We're kind of out in the forefront of getting this technology rolled out, and a lot of other counties are looking at us and what we're doing so they can wash, rinse, repeat, and copy it in their counties. And COVID money's made this happen. Sales tax has been fabulous for a lot of counties to make some of this happen with internet sales and sales tax on internet things. So we can roll this technology out way faster than what we ever could in the past.
Thanks, Matt. A lot going on, a lot to manage too when you think of just about this one little topic. I mean, I don't want to say it's little, but it's one topic of many that a commissioner has to deal with. John, I'm going to go with you. So maybe talk a little bit about, as you mentioned this, that, you're rolling out equipment, small to large, in this sector and connectivity, and maybe just kind of speak to some of that. And I know you guys have are going to be in the near future thinking about offering commercially at a large scale some autonomy, but maybe talk about some of your efforts on that and back to this connectivity and helping growers take advantage of the technology that you're providing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, connectivity is such an important topic for Deere that about a year ago, we announced that our goal was to connect 1.5 million machines by 2026. We're frankly, we're about a third of the way there. And it's not just connecting machines for connectivity's sake. It's because we have a lot of technologies that we can bring to the market, which will help farmers be more sustainable in their operations, help them save money on inputs like herbicide, for fungicide, et cetera, and be more efficient in their operations. So when you think like a technology like See & Spray, for example, that's a technology where we See & Spray Ultimate, you can take your sprayer down your field and it will distinguish between a weed and a crop and only spray the weed with an herbicide. And that requires, that's machine learning. So it requires the assessment of millions of basically images of weeds. And if you cannot ever connect that machine to the internet to essentially, download the new database of weeds, you're not improving, you're not getting better, you're not becoming more efficient. Similarly, in-field data sharing is a technology we sell today that requires you to have a connection so that, let's say two operators are going through a field with two different sprayers. They can see where each other is, what each operator has done in the field already, so that they don't overlap and spray a crop twice, for example. Well, that requires connectivity so that they can see each other's maps. So those are the types of technologies. And then certainly autonomy, where if you run into a situation where the onboard technology has seen something that it doesn't like in the field and therefore stops, you need to get an image up to the human in the loop in the cloud and back down to the machine that says, yes, you can proceed or not. And so those are the types of applications, use cases where connectivity is essential. You wouldn't have those technologies if you did not have a connected machine. And so it's either, you don't have them or they're dramatically optimized by having connectivity. And so, yeah, again, for us, it's all types of, all methods, all ways of getting folks connected are key to us. And so, when you buy a Deere machine today, it comes with a modem on the device that is connectivity for the life of that machine. So we don't have any subscription costs. There's enough friction that we can remove if we bear the cost burden of connecting the machine, that it's worth it to us. And so, really now what we're trying to do is to find a way to expand the coverage map of where our customers get connectivity. And certainly, like, if you don't have connectivity at the home base on the farm, good luck getting it out in the field, right? So any efforts that that federal, state, local governments are doing to bring connectivity to the center of the farm and frankly even to the fields is something that we're fully supportive of. So yeah, it's an exciting time though to be in ag and in ag tech. We just need to close the gap on connectivity.
Yeah. Hey, and I was going to lead this into Scott's, Johnny, if you don't mind. So when you talk about some of those just today, you're seeing spray or other technology, give us a little bit of sense, like optimized bandwidth to make that, really work well. I mean, what would I need at my farm at kind of at minimum? Does that make sense? Yeah.
So, certainly for See & Spray Ultimate, again, that's one where, you can take that out into the field and it will operate without connectivity in the field. But for you to have an optimized experience, where that database of images is continuously being updated. You're going to need that machine to be connected at some point, so that you can download that new payload, right? Operation Center, which is our digital ecosystem. Well, if you want to see in real time where your machines are, those machines need to be connected. You certainly need to be connected at the point where you're viewing that. So I would say at a minimum, having connection at the center of the farm where your operations are being run is certainly at a bare minimum. But we would even, I think, take it a step further and say that we would like every machine to be connected continuously in the field. And as I mentioned at the outset, we're so committed to that reality that we are looking at all options, right? So including satellite connectivity. What does that business case look like? I've seen some of the notes in the chat are talking about cost of connectivity, et cetera. Well, today, again, Deere bears the burden of connecting those machines from a cost standpoint. What does that look like in the future when, something like satellite connectivity? Still need to take that one across the finish line. But again, we're so committed to it that we want to see continuous connectivity even in the fields. So I don't know if that answers your question, John, but it's, certainly bare bones at the base of the center of the farm is important. But for us, it's all machines all the time in the field connected is really what we would like to see.
No, I think that paints the picture, Johnny. I mean, that's what we need, right? Is that continuous connectivity to really take advantage of these technologies across the board. But more importantly, what you guys are trying to offer and do with your technologies and within Deere and help your dealers and your customers have the right experience out of all of this. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. Scott, so let's talk a little bit about, and then we'll let others comment, but I know we've had a lot of discussions on this but what do you see, upload, download, what do we need in here in ag to really enable things today and in the near future as well, from your perspective?
Well, I'll kind of start out, and I want to make a couple comments because I think Matt made some very important points. When we look at broadband and internet connectivity in rural America, the first thing that the counties, the states need to focus on is obviously safety. And then after that, education and health. And we kind of got exposed, if you will, during COVID in terms of helping us to realize that we have haves and have-nots in a lot of areas. But as I look to agriculture and I begin thinking what the future looks like and what the needs are going to be, and Jonathon did a great job of highlighting some of those things. Three things come to mind. We talked about upload speeds. We talked about download speeds. Everybody wants their streaming video. We get that. But when we begin connecting machines in the field, that's where it gets kind of interesting. And Jonathon kind of hit on it. Everybody's thinking about we're going to have autonomous equipment in the field, and that's probably going to happen. I'm not going to disagree with that. But early on, it's going to be what we call supervised autonomy. In other words, there's going to be a person somewhere monitoring the performance of multiple machines. And I think Jonathon hit on it. When that machine stops, the question is how do you get it going again? Do you send a person out to the field, or is there some kind of other intervention via internet connectivity? A couple other things to think about too. Sometimes many times in automated equipment in the field, we need multiple avenues of connectivity. Okay, in other words, we need fail-safe or safety backup systems on a lot of these. And so we're going to have to think about that connectivity is going to be machine to machine. It's going to be machine to internet, if you will. But that mobile machinery makes it much more difficult as well. In other words, what happens when that machine loses that connectivity? Does it fold out? Does it stop? Is it able to continue moving in the field? So we begin thinking about a lot of those things. We talked about upload and download speeds but there's this other thing called latency as well. In other words, how long is information transmission delayed, if you will, in terms of connecting the machines? Obviously, and Jonathon hit on that great point, when you have multiple machines in the field and they have to work together and it has to be coordinated, you have to ensure that connectivity exists. And there's no question about that. Beyond that, we also look at some of the other bandwidth needs on farms. And the question is, Are they things that have to happen immediately, or can we kind of store that data, buffer it for a little bit, and then transmit it when there's adequate bandwidth? So I begin thinking about water management and some of those other things. We have weather stations, we have in situ sensors. It's going to be important to connect all those. The other thing that I think is very critical in all this is what is the cost of connecting those individual devices. And so we might be looking at the farms of the future, if you will, that we may have 100, 200 connected devices on that farm. Matt started down the road of IoT, and I think that's definitely going to be one of those things that we look to in the future in terms of looking how we manage all the resources and assets of that farm. I mentioned water management as being one of those critical things coming up, and I think we're going to look to IoT as a way of managing water and water quality in some respects in terms of what's moving off these farms. So again, looking at the future, I think AI is here to stay. There's no question about it. And Jonathon hit on that in terms of the See and Spray technology. Think about that machine going to the field, and maybe the intelligence payload for that machine is going to depend upon the crop, the stage of growth of that crop, that specific geographic location, maybe has some historical weather patterns. And so it's going to be important for that machine to be connected to enable the flow of that intelligence payload to allow that machine to perform at its optimum. And so a lot of good things to think about here. I'd like to say there's a silver bullet in terms of solving all the problems. We know that doesn't exist right now. Maybe some are going to materialize, but I think it's really going to be a number of considerations. The other thing I'm going to kind of leave at this, the question is where does the computation really need to be done? Can it be done on the edge? Okay, can it be done in the farm office, the farmstead, the county level, or is it going to have to be done in the cloud in some respects? And so there's going to be a lot of this that we're going to work through in terms of the prioritization of how that data moves or how it flows and what that connectivity means. So
maybe Scott, just real quick, again, thinking terminology, we're throwing a lot of terminology, and probably for us and the panelists, we're all kind of used to the terminology, but you're saying on the payload, the intelligence part, because of the vast, database and everything like that, that's probably not going to rest on the machine itself. That's going to have to be as need in the future, right? In terms of this quote intelligence.
Well, one of the things I talk about is when artificial intelligence kind of hits its prime in use on the farm, there could be 200 or 300 use cases for Ohio farmers. Okay. Each time that machine goes to the field, it's going to be doing something different, if you will, in terms of management of that crop. And so when we talk about these intelligence payloads, if you will, it's the intelligence that gives that machine the ability to look at an image, perceive what's going on or understand what's going on in the image, and then turn around to make the machine respond to that. Okay. And so again, we could be managing wheat, we could be managing soybeans, we could be managing corn. They all have different nutritional needs. We're going to be looking at spraying weeds in those crops. They all differ a little bit. So again, looking to the future and looking at these use cases, if you will, or these possibilities, that changes the way we look at that intelligence payload and how often it has to be made available to the machine.
If I can maybe just add, it's one thing to have a machine doing, machine learning as it's going through a field or as it's been through a field dozens of times over the course of several years. It's another thing to aggregate all of the images that different machines have seen, call it tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of machines have seen throughout the United States or throughout North America or throughout the world, aggregate all of those images so that you can better determine what's a weed, what's a crop, what do I need to spray, what don't I need to spray. It's really when you aggregate all of those that you start to have improved operation. And if they can't share with each other because they don't have good access to the internet, then that weakens the overall solution, and certainly weakens the solution for the operator that's trying to download that updated payload.
Yeah, and in many cases, Johnny, just real quick, the operator may not even know that that's download uploads going on.
Absolutely.
Either.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
that's the idea, right? Their machine is getting better. That's what we would hope they would experience.
Yeah. And so I want to bring that up for everyone that when we talk about artificial intelligence, I think a lot of us, even with smartphones, we use it every day to some degree if we got certain apps and even on some machines today, and we just don't know it's there. But as an operator, we get to experience that improved performance and stuff like that. So anyways, Matt, Steven, I want to let you guys thumb wrestle a little bit, but here's what I'm seeing. Our people here today, there's a few of them that don't have any internet. And really the majority of everyone's in the poor to decent connectivity. And you see in the chat right up front, everyone was talking about just better connectivity, reliability of connectivity. Just go down the list. I mean, it's really about reliability and having it there, and to some degree, not even knowing it's there, just things work. But talk a little bit about where we're, maybe some of those challenges that we still have to go through. I think some of that's kind of come up, but maybe from your perspective, talk about how we're trying to, get through some of these challenges. So you talk about challenges and what we're trying to do. And Steven or Matt, it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, I'll hit a few points and punt it over to Matt. So as as was explained earlier by the panelists, we're really moving toward an environment with AI-driven insights, right? And the need to capture large amounts of data from different sources and turn that data into intelligence and actionable insights. And that's not just prevalent at the farmhouse. It's beyond the last mile, it's the last acre. And so when I start to think about the connectivity needs, whether that be narrowband needs for IoT or your higher bandwidth use cases, and I'll explain a few of those in a minute. We need to have connectivity that's going to enable that. And what's important, I know we focus a lot on download speeds, but there's also the upload element as well. And with our FCC task force, you'll see we went pretty bold with our recommendations. We're looking out pretty far in advance in the the demand side. So we're making very bold recommendations around symmetrical speeds. A gig up and down at the farmhouse as a target, 100 down and up out at the last acre. But how do you achieve that at the end of the day? And how do you really motivate those that look to invest? John Deere is a very unique case. I mean, very forward-thinking company, also out there at the farm, but back at their factories. They were forward-thinking enough to invest in PAL licenses for CBRS, which is a mid-band technology. Now, realistically, mid-band's not going to be available everywhere, but you're starting to see it crop up in communities even across Ohio. When you think about, John, you and I spoke about Ohio Transparent Telecom, OTT. They invested in CBRS. They have since closed the digital divide gap to over 20,000 unserved households across Coshocton County. And this technology, in essence, lends itself to higher throughput. So when you think of frequency ranges, low, mid, high band, your low bands are ultimately going to provide you with sub gigahertz. Mid band is going to get in that 1 to 6 gigahertz, and then high band, which is referred to as millimeter wave, 24 to 39 gigahertz. And why that's important, the density of the network, the investment that's required as you go up to higher bands, it propagates lower distances, but it also, those higher bands give you more throughput, lower latency. So in mid-band, where CBRS sits, just as an example, you'll see speeds from 100 meg all the way up to a gig. And we have actual use cases where, for example, with NSF RPAL, that we've deployed video streaming applications via drone operations of 100 megabits and up on the uplink and 400 megabits on the downlink. So that's really important, but it's not a one size fits all. When you start to think about delivering that connectivity to the farm, you have to look at it from that upside down layer cake, from the low to high band technologies. You have to consider that to get there, you do need fiber. Now, fiber is not realistic to every house in rural America. It's growing at a 1.5% CAGR from a penetration perspective. But that fiber is also used for backhaul to power these small cells, like 5G small cells, that go out, and that ultimately enables your mid-band technologies in rural and agricultural communities. And then, there's the IoT equation, getting that last acre feed out across the farms. And, with satellite, there are cases to be made that, in fields, ranches, when you need universal connectivity, whether it's soil irrigation or silo tank monitoring or monitoring of livestock health, that does solve, many of those unserved areas, not just in the United States, but across the world. And then as, you start to think about, investment trends, and enabling the use cases, not only now, but into the future, it's really important to, consider private networks, whether that's CBRS or another type of radio frequency that farmers can leverage, can deploy and manage at their own, at their own will, obviously with the support of managed services companies and technology providers, to really get over the obstacles of advanced connectivity out across your small and mid-sized farms.
So go ahead, Steven, finish.
Yeah, and so it's, the innovation is there, right? But it's about the economics, and there are, quite a number of investment vehicles out there. I think Matt spoke to some earlier. For example, just this, past year, actually 2 years ago, 2021, Congress passed a $65 billion bill called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. You're starting to see some of that now come to fruition. A portion of, our recommendation of the FCC Precision Agriculture Task Force will tie into some of the technology innovation set asides, which is $1 billion under the 5G fund, which is a $9 billion fund established for rural America back in 2020, that's enabling telehealth and precision agriculture, remote learning opportunities. It even had $680 million set aside for tribal communities. And that ultimately, that 5G fund rolls up through the mobile services portion of the high cost programs under the federal programs. But there's a number of funding vehicles. So as counties are trying to figure it out, there's different ways to slice it. There's public-private partnerships. There's working with your local MSOs and CSPs. There's, bringing in advisors and going out there and applying for funds and, making an effort, I think, as Matt mentioned, to provide that middle mile connectivity, and then, drive service providers to come in there, invest in the infrastructure and the layer on OSS, BSS services that you need to enable that connectivity out to the last acre. So
Steven done an excellent job telling, where we're at and stuff. There's a lot of good stuff in his points. But when you get down to the nuts and bolts of how do we roll this out, the problem that a county is coming into now is finding equipment. Everybody's rolled this money out from the feds and locals and states to provide and build this system out. Then everybody's going after the same equipment. And there's only so many providers out in the world that's going to provide your antennas and your wires and all that stuff. And what we're bumping up against, even when we get to the point where we're deciding on putting fiber in, is high quality sand to make the fiber. So there's some, everybody says the speed of government is slow. Well, there's a reason it's slow, because we're trying to get over some of these hurdles. And the hurdles that we're finding is finding a provider that we can work with that has stuff on the shelf. Because there's plenty of providers that can do it. There's a lot of educated companies out there that's been doing good connectivity for years in telecom systems and things like that. But you don't have the equipment on the shelf to get it rolled out in the speed that people need it. So you have some counties that's going to move forward at the speed of light because they have stuff on the shelf. And then you're going to have other counties that's waiting for stuff to come in. And Lord knows we all have been affected by getting parts because of stuff overseas and in the U.S. itself. But those are a couple of the things that's actually going to slow us down. is we got two very good companies that can compete. One's got the stuff, one don't. So
Yeah,
one can
that's-
roll it out within the year, and
That's a great point. And, there have been supply chain issues at lead times, with your active and your passive components. And, one of the recommendations in the FCC, in our working group of the task force was, to incentivize domestic production around antenna, chipsets, modems, power supplies, those things that can, based on, macroeconomic environments can be impacted if you're dependent upon overseas. But, some of it also gets to good planning, getting ahead of a project in enough time to have your product staged, integrated, configured. It's not just the availability of product. It's, getting through planning and zoning. If you're going to deploy, a small cell network as an example, and attach small cells on utility poles, the FCC has done a good job to really, reduce shot clock rules around the approval process to accelerate the deployment of broadband infrastructure, fixed wireless access. And then there's also the labor side of things as well. I tend to think back to some of my one of my good friends who dropped out of college and started up an underground fiber construction company, compared to myself, who's got 3 college degrees. And, he's going to be retired in a couple of years over the age of 50. So that's a skill set that's in high demand. So it's getting the right subcontractors and service provider to go out there and deliver the networks in a high quality fashion.
Yeah.
And I just want to add one little thing: is anybody that's looking to work with their county commission, local, state government, is to look to build a network that you can add to, change, grow. So we're starting out in our particular counties, we're starting out at a low level, 25 and 3, but we can come back and put another chip, another controller, something within the boxes we're installing to bring you up to the 100 by 20, the 100 symmetrical. We can get the half gig and gig service. So to future proof, you'll hear that as you talk to a lot of folks, is future proofing your network, is when you're looking to install this equipment, is make sure you're able to go back and add stuff to it to make it eligible 10, 15 years down the road. That way you don't have to go back and change out your controllers, change out your wiring and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, when you're thinking about your fiber deployment plan for backhaul right across a county or a rural community, if you're deploying for low band technologies, that signal range is going to extend a pretty long distance. So you're going to place a radio that can support lower band connectivity needs up to 75 miles. But you start to think about future proofing, and to Matt's point, if you're deploying mid-band technologies, as I mentioned, CBRS being one of those in the 3.5 gigahertz spectrum, you're going to be several miles, maybe up to 24 miles if you've got clear line of sight. And then when you get into higher band with millimeter wave, 24 to 39 gigahertz, you're only looking at maybe up to 4 miles if you've got clear line of sight. So you have to think about the deployment aspects of the network, the terrain that you're dealing with. So that's why it's really important to have proper planning and design before you go about investing in the deployment of infrastructure.
Steve and Matt, I'd like to interject here because I think it becomes important. So much of what we do in terms of broadband internet access in rural America is based on subscribers. And Matt, you kind of went down this road. The cost of connecting that person that's maybe out at the distal part of the county in some respects. One of the things that I would encourage people to begin thinking about is, how does internet connectivity affect land values? Okay. And if we kind of turn this around and say, what is the cost per acre for this connectivity? How does that translate into land values? But also, how does that translate into a farmer's willingness in terms of cash rents or lease arrangements to lease some ground over other ground? And so as this evolves, we might want to change kind of that business model or that concept of how we think about rolling out broadband.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the companies that invest in infrastructure, they look at a 10, 20-year pro forma analysis, and strategically speaking, they're always assessing, from a site acquisition standpoint, locations to place network infrastructure, whether that's a tower or placement of a small cell device. So that is a very important element of the equation. You mentioned, Scott, the subscribers. That's the tough part, right? The economics. If you've got a high capex to build out your network, and your ongoing, recurring costs to manage that network don't equate out. And this happens a lot. You think about the United States. I read a stat that we have over 2,000 small WISPs around the country that have less than 3,000 subscribers. They have to operate on razor thin costs to be profitable. And it's our job out there in the industry as vendors, Ericsson being one of the largest globally, to put solutions in place that will help these WISPs thrive and grow their subscriber base in an ARPU that's competitive out there in the marketplace.
Yeah. Hey, we're running down on time. I mean, I think we could sit here and talk about this for hours, really. I mean, it's a really important topic in my book, and something that we all need to kind of be not only aware of, but I encourage people to be involved with as we go through this. But let's take a couple questions, if you don't mind. And maybe this is Steven or Matt, but one of the questions was, one of the hurdles of running fiber is the cost of crossing railroad tracks. And I guess I would also maybe throw in some of the major thoroughfares as interstates as well. But local companies are reluctant to cover that cost. Will there be funding to help with this? So Matt, or maybe start with you, since you're kind of living through some of this right now.
I can't cover the funding aspect. We're doing our bid package out as a total project. So we're going to say, hey, we're going to cover this area. What does it cost? And that's all part of it. But definitely access is a huge topic to get across. We got 3 railroads that go through our county that we're going to have to cross north to south. And we're able to do that by working with the state and getting some access rights on overpasses and items like that. The county beside us in Miami County, they've even got where they've tried to get internet across a large river. And John, you may be familiar with this, West Milton, and it's a little town, but anyhow, they run fiber within the asphalt on the edge of the bridge. And it's just like a ribbon that goes across the top of the surface. And that's how they bridge that gap to provide internet service, the fiber from one side of the bridge to the other, to a new housing community. And that's some new tech that's out there. So there's some options to get it across, like overpasses. You got to be strategic when you design the engineering. As Steven has said, it's good to have your planning out there first, so you can run a major line up to a hub or a point by crossing through an overpass, instead of having to deal with boring underneath railroads. Because we all know that railroads can be difficult to gain access, because they own everything basically from the core to the outer space is their corridor. That's their easement, and it's usually hard to cross it. But I know there's some options out there. Some of the larger companies, you've worked with the larger companies that already have access agreements because they've dealt with them and worked with them in the past. So it goes back to the companies you contract with, is have reputable reputations, and they have those connections to make those to cost. To get back to the point of cost of locals to do it, it's going to be darn hard for a local WISP or internet service provider to get it across there without working with a larger company that already has those access agreements.
Yeah, that's a great point. Access agreements, having the right equipment for aerial and underground deployment. Those decisions around trenching, micro trenching, boring, those all come into play when you're building out your construction plan. But the question that was posed around covering the cost to build out the network infrastructure, I think I've mentioned earlier the Infrastructure Act created $65 billion in broadband funding, and $42.5 billion of that $65 billion was set aside for broadband infrastructure build out. And it's spread across, administered by NTIA, but it's spread across, multiple government programs from BEAD to tribal and middle mile. So I would, encourage looking into that. The funding is there. Obviously you have to meet the criteria, timelines, the right geography that's available for that funding based on unserved and underserved areas. But you capture that funding and you just have to build out the right construction plan to execute efficiently and cost effectively.
Yeah. And let's end on this, and Scott and Johnny, I'm going to throw it this way. You guys, appreciate you typing in the chat and answering so already, but education's come up, and maybe if you don't each might touch on that, just talk about education, Scott. I mean, you're at the university, but we know there's colleges and others that are really actively trying to do. And Johnny, I think that word internship had come up, and maybe comment on that too, because that's part of the experience. I know here at Ohio State, we require our students to do at least 2 internships on that. But Scott, if you want to start, or Johnny, and then we'll just kind of end on that, and then we'll get our kind of QR code up for our CCAs here in a little bit.
Yeah, real quickly, John, here at Ohio State, we have recognized this need for, I'm going to say, College of Agriculture traditional graduates to have a better handle on the technologies that are evolving. I don't think we're going to turn an animal scientist into a computer scientist. Don't misunderstand me, but we have to get our animal scientists working with computer scientists. And by the way, it goes the other direction as well. And so we've been doing a lot to make certain that our students, our graduates, understand the technology, how it's evolving, and the implications for the careers of the future, if you will. It's a very important element of what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can just speak to the internships. So that's how I joined Deere. I was a grad student, joined Deere via an internship. We have all kinds of programs for incoming students, and they're fantastic. I mean, you'll typically get a mentor. You'll get thrown into real world stuff immediately. So I am fairly certain that we have a strong recruiting presence at Ohio State. I am not in HR. So I don't know what that looks like. But I'll put my contact information in the chat here. If somebody has a specific question, I'd be happy to answer it or redirect it to the right person. But I've been with Deere for 11 years, and it's been a great experience for me thus far. And anybody that's interested in ag or construction and forestry, which is also another part of our business, I'd encourage you to apply.
Yeah. Thanks, Johnny. And I'm just going to kind of hit on that. I've had a couple of my students come out and do internships with Deere and actually go out to Des Moines and work within the Precision Ag group. It's been, as far as I can tell, a wonderful experience for them. And those students actually have all been going back into local dealerships to be part of their Precision Ag program. And so it's been wonderful, Johnny, and been very telling those students and what they get exposed to and what's happening at Deere and other companies too, right? I mean, everyone has some kind of digital or precision ag focus these days. And so I encourage people to take the opportunity to go out and do that. So with that, I'm going to leave on this and we'll kind of wrap up here. We did ask everyone about 5G coverage, and majority of people do not have 5G coverage. And so something like 63%. But as we think about upload, download, and even needs for 5G, still a lot of work to do. And I think that's kind of been something that's been hit on by all 4 of our panelists today is a lot of work in this area, but a lot of things yet to come and kind of flush out to really enable connectivity at the farm. So I want to thank Matt, Steven, Scott, and Johnny. I appreciate your willingness to take time out of your busy schedules to join us today. Really appreciate your comments and perspectives on this. And so with that, Elizabeth, I'm going to turn it back over to you real quick to throw up the QR code. We do have one more Precision University next week. That's going to be on our e-fields, which was just released a few weeks ago, but talk about some of our on-farm research. You can go see the current report or 2022 results at goosu.edu. efields. We ended up with 292 trials over 40 some counties in Ohio doing on-farm research. So we also have our agronomy team programs out there coming up in February and March. Encourage you to join those. All listed there. You can go to the agcrops.osu.edu events to sign up or see what's offered out there. And then I think finally here, we appreciate everything. Again, I appreciate the panelists for joining us today. Thank you very much.